Hi there.
Audra.
How are
Hi.
you? I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Good, good.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. Now, I
Awesome.
think Blanca should be coming in. Is she in the wait? Is she not in the waiting room, is she?
No, and actually, when
Where did-
I
oh,
joined, it said that she was already in the meeting, and then she wasn't actually when I opened it.
okay, I'm gonna text her. I'm in the meeting now. Okay.
Okay.
And then where are you from? Or
We're
are
from Sanger, so just outside of Fresno in California.
okay. And you are, what is your position?
I'm a district instructional specialist, so I help support with PD. We coach teachers, so I'm at the district level, but really a teacher on special assignment.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm hosting with Blanca, so she'll probably be
Okay.
doing most of this, but
Great. One thing I will need, oh, actually, never mind. It's my Zoom. So I'll have the participant list at the end because I'll need to turn that in as our participants will be getting compensated for this time.
great.
So I'll keep track of that. And we should have a good range of people from TK through, I think, even eighth grade. So this would be great. I think we have
Oh, even to
20,
eighth grade. That's wonderful.
20 participants have registered. So we'll see who joins us today.
Yes, that is great. Okay, and Blanca, she's asking she says she's in, mine says waiting for host to start meeting.
Oh,
What if she's in the wrong one?
were there multiple?
There was another meeting today that I was in hosting as well, but I don't know, maybe she clicked on the wrong link or something. I don't see how that would have been possible though, because she sent me the link.
Okay, but
So,
I did see her name as like she's in the waiting room, but she's not. Like I don't see her anymore. Natalie, are you there?
Yes.
Did you get multiple links, like different links, or were they just like did you have another option to send another Zoom?
I only got this one. Hi.
Okay. Hi there. That's okay. Okay. Just want to make sure.
okay,
Okay.
I told Blanca to rejoin.
Okay.
Yes, because she definitely has to be here because
Yeah.
I'm still learning. So that's why I'm a host.
Okay. That is so cute. And where are you from?
I am from Sacramento, California.
Oh, okay.
And I just recently retired from the Elk Grove School District. It's like the 5th largest district in the state.
Nice.
After 32 years. And I did that last year with the pandemic and the virtual. And yeah, that was a huge learning curve. It was fun though. I'd rather be in person, but
Right.
I learned a lot that year for sure.
Oh, same. I also was helping out last year with the virtual learning and, sixth grade and it was different. And
Oh yeah, I had fourth
good
graders.
experience, but
Yes,
definitely challenging.
very good experience, very challenging for sure.
Hi, Haley. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin in just a few minutes.
Yes, and I'll put the participation guide in the chat here.
Perfect.
I've got it right here, so I'll do that.
And if you wouldn't mind just periodically putting it in, because I know as they join, they won't see previous.
That's what I understand. If they're not joined yet, then they don't see it. So I'll continue to keep if people keep coming in.
Thank you.
For sure, for sure.
Now I don't know how to make you a co-host. I think I just go to the participants and more. I'm making sure I can do this.
You'll click on my 3 dots up in the right-hand corner, and then then you can say it.
There it is. It's just been a little bit since I've done this. Okay, there we go. I still am not seeing Blanca. I'm adding all the other participants.
Yeah, now I can add too. I can see it over there.
Perfect. Oh, there's Blanca. Yay.
Blanca. I'm like, hallelujah. Okay, and she comes.
Welcome.
And maybe everybody put their grade level in the chat, so we're familiar with what grade you're at. That'd be really helpful.
Awesome.
And then I'll continue to put the participation guide in the chat. Hey, Blanca.
Hello, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened.
That was weird, yeah.
No worries. Thank you for being with us today.
Of course. Thanks for having us. We're very
Yes.
excited. Let me go ahead and first off, do I have, let me see, can I share my screen?
Try it and see. I don't think I've had any setting posted that was going to prevent you from that, but
Okay.
if so, then I can make you a co-host.
Perfect.
Oh no, we see your screen just fine. Oh, but it's really enlarged.
Yep.
Yeah.
Give me just a second here.
Okay.
How does that look? Can you see it?
Perfect.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Looks great.
So I was letting, is it Tenley? Is that how I say your name?
Yes.
Okay.
Tenley
I was
Moore.
letting Tenley know about how many participants we have registered. It's about 20 for today, give or take a little. So if we get closer to that number, we can go ahead and begin. I just like to give them a few more minutes to jump on if that's okay.
Of course. And I'm just going through the chat here. We've got 2nd grade, 1st grade, 6th grade, first year doing guided reading. Yay. That's wonderful.
Great.
Typically in our district, we usually did guided reading TK through about 3rd grade. And then this year, many school sites have decided and teams decided we wanted to extend that beyond. So we've got some all the way to 6th and some sites are going K8 with guided reading. So
Awesome.
you'll
That's
see the
great.
range.
Yes. And then I put in the participation guide, but I'll do it again. I'll keep doing that right now. Let's see.
And then I also emailed the handouts that were sent to me through the calendar invite. So if anybody else needed to access it through there, they're welcome to do that.
Perfect. And I know, I'm sorry, quality isn't great on that, but honestly, it's just
it's
more of
okay.
a note-taking tool, right? And I'll reference some things. And because it is, 90 minutes, our participants are definitely going to want to go back and take a look at that. So maybe print it off at a later time, and I'll go ahead and say that as well. And Tenley, let me know if my connection gets bad at any time. I told you I'm out traveling, so I'm in a hotel room. Don't you see my lovely background versus my unmade bed? So just let me know and I can shut my camera off if at any time we have a connection issue, because you never know, right?
Yeah, for sure. And so the participants that have just come in, I've added the participation guide in the chat, and that is something for you to use as Blanca is presenting today. I'll be hosting, so if you have any questions, you could put them in the chat and let me know, and I can get back to you on that. And Blanca is, again, she's going to be running the show here, but I also want to just introduce myself. I'm Tenley Willock, and I recently retired from teaching in the classroom after 32 years, and I've taught kindergarten through 6th grade throughout that whole time, and then had other million, how we do as teachers, we got a million different hats. So, and I absolutely love teaching about literacy. And when I was offered this job, I was like, oh my goodness, like, this is fantastic, because I love working with teachers. And so I'm very excited to be here. And like I said, go ahead and put your grade level in the chat, and we'll get started here. We are going to be using some engagement tools like, again, the chat. And then if you want to unmute to answer questions or ask questions, that would be great. Just make sure you remute yourself. And then we'll also be using other tools like the breakout rooms, possibly annotation, if you're able to do that, things like that. So
yeah, we'll have to see how much time we have here. I know this is going to be what I like to call the cooking show version. But we're gonna have a good time. So it looks like we have about 14, maybe not including us through here. So
I say we go ahead and I say we can begin. We're recording, and so I will upload this to our shared folder, and they can access it if they missed the first part.
Absolutely. Thanks, Audra.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here with us. My name is Blanca Cunha. I am a literacy specialist with Scholastic Education. I'm super excited to be here with you. I am passionate about teaching reading. That is what my love has always been. I was a kinder and 1st grade teacher for many, many years. I was a reading interventionist for K-5, and then I worked out of the district office mentoring as an instructional coach, summer school administrator, done all of it like we all do, right? and I'm super excited to be back here with you. I've worked with a lot of the teachers there in your district, so I might see some familiar faces or names on here. I do encourage you to ask questions. Tenley and I love engagement. We love to have your video on if you feel so inclined and you feel Zoom ready. We love to have that video on and so we can kind of see how you're doing. Your face says a lot of things, right? And I have Tenley running the back end for me. So she's going to be answering questions if there are some questions that come through, or she'll have some pause times for me saying, hey, Blanca, can we address this particular question? We want you to feel very comfortable in our learning environment and feel safe asking questions. So with that in mind, welcome again. And I'd like for us to start off by just kind of finding out what you know about guided reading. So either feel free to come off mute or pop it in the chat. What do you know about guided reading? And this is not a trick question, okay? So this is going to help me if there are misunderstandings or you have particular questions or you're like, I don't even know. This will help us kind of guide our time together today.
Well, I'll go ahead and go first. So I've used a little bit of guided reading just as a way to help guide the students through the reading, guide them through the lesson, and try to reach some of those deeper understandings or those critical things that we want them to know about from our unit.
Charlie, thank you so much. I love the fact that you brought out social studies because cross-content, right? Reading just doesn't happen at a certain time of the day. And then we're like, oh, we're moving on to math. Oh, we're moving on to science. We are embedding the reading and the strategies in all the content areas. So thank you for bringing that up. Anybody else want to share?
A lot of my knowledge about guided reading as a new teacher and new to second grade is kind of related to the BAS test for me. So like that was kind of my first connection with guided reading. So like those letter like levels I know is a big part in grouping your students and in what aspects they need some guidance with.
Thank you, Haley. That's fantastic. Yes. So we do have a leveling system and we work off of guided reading levels. There is a letter name that goes with each of the levels. Okay. But I don't want us to get stuck on levels. And I certainly don't want us to get stuck on grade levels. So we could have a 5th grade student with skills at a guided reading level D. So we always encourage our teachers and for you to translate that to your students that we want to look at the skills that are embedded within each of those levels. So students aren't leveled for life, right? You're not, Haley, you are not a J for life. You have the skills of a J, but this is what I need to get you to do and be masterful at, close to masterful, to get you to a K. So thank you for bringing that up. Those are great things. I think I see Stacy said keeping groups fluid. That's right. We're going to keep moving kids around until so that it's fitting their needs, constantly monitoring to see whether they're in the correct group and moving their progress forward. Thank you. Marion, did I say it correctly? Hopefully. Small group, shorter text for emergent readers, about 30 minutes a day with a question mark. Be confident in that, my friend. Yes, we're looking at 20 to 30 minutes a day, depending on our grade level. Of course, our lower grade levels, we need to build up some stamina, don't we? And we're going to talk about that. And I want you to think about that too. How can I build up stamina? All right, you probably have all kinds of other ideas about guided reading. Feel free to pop those in, but I'm going to go ahead and continue and just kind of briefly run through what we're going to talk about in our time together. I want us to build a common shared understanding of guided reading. So our goal is to have an understanding of what guided reading is. How are we going to group our students? What materials are you going to need? I'm going to start us off with an exploration of the structure of guided reading. We're going to talk about text complexity and the characteristics. That's how we're going to select a text in an instructional focus. Then I'm going to actually take us through and model a guided reading lesson plan. Now, it might not be at the same grade level that you teach, but you're going to be able to see that whole process as we move through. And then Maybe you'll be able to dip your toes, if we have time, into starting to plan a guided reading lesson on your own. If not, you're going to have the tools to do that as homework. You didn't know you were going to leave here with homework, did you? All right, let's go ahead and get going. This first section is an overview of guided reading. Think of this as that high-level overview, kind of that bird's eye view, if you will, of all the different pieces of guided reading. Every day, our students, they're exposed to a variety of reading instruction. At least I hope they are. Guided reading is just part of that gradual release model. It's like, if you think of it, if we're in a race, we're kind of passing the baton during a relay race, where consider yourself, the teacher, as that first runner, and you're working to pass that baton to your student readers. Now, as we pass that baton, the level of text the students are actually exposed to and reading, that changes. It moves from everybody reading at grade level or above grade level text, right out here. That generally happens in a read aloud. Our whole interactive read aloud is a whole class. And then we engage our students in shared reading, which is grade level text. A lot of students can't do that yet. And then we pull them into small group instruction. Right here, our guided reading small groups, where we plan and implement these lesson plans at their instructional level. Then the ultimate goal is independent reading. We want our students to be able to apply all those skills to their independent reading. So this is kind of, I think, the big daddy of them all, the ideal situation of where we want students to be. They're reading that text all at their independent level. So you can see here the 4 different types of reading and the place where guided reading groups fit into that. So guided reading is a very structured and purposeful process to each of our lessons. We have a very structured process, and guided reading actually includes very specific things. If we don't have these pieces in place, we're not truly implementing guided reading as our wonderful guru, Jan Richardson, says it should be implemented. Now you can see we're going to have planning throughout. There's going to be planning in each of our stages here. But before we can even get started, we have to assess our students and we have to group them and put them into like reading groups with similar skills. That way we can select our text and decide what is the purpose of our lesson. What's that instructional focus going to be? After we've grouped our students, we then can, and we have a text that we've pulled, we're going to provide a book introduction. We're going to preview any text features and vocabulary words that students might encounter that they may have trouble with. This is also the place where we're going to introduce and model, if needed, what that instructional focus is. What's our purpose? What do we want them to get out of the whole reading experience? This is the before section of our guided reading lesson plan. Now I'm just going through this kind of quickly, just so you know, because we're going to dive more deeply into it as I move through our time together. Our second part of our guided reading lesson is the during reading section. This is considered the heart of guided reading. This is where a majority of the time is spent, is during reading. Students are reading the text independently. There's no round robin reading. There's no choral reading, popcorn reading. Students are reading independently. And you, sitting around your small group, are able to confer with your students. You can prompt them with questions, ask them questions as necessary. And then the final piece of our guided reading lesson is the after section. Students have an opportunity to retell what they've read. You are going to reinforce that teaching point based on what you heard while students were reading. And Jan also says this is actually the best place to complete word study and writing. Now, all of that doesn't necessarily take place on day 1, but it is part of the guided reading process. So I want you to think about what you currently know about guided reading and the planning process, and which might be the most challenging component for you to plan. So think about that for a moment. Is it the before reading? Is it the during reading? Is it the after reading? And just type that into the chat for me, just so I can kind of see what your thoughts are. What has been, or what do you think might be the most difficult portion to plan for you? Stacy says the after. Haley says after. This is very, very common. Charlie says the during. Okay. And again, there's no right or wrong answer to this. I'm just kind of gauging. I'm seeing, all right, Vanessa says the during. All right. I want you to be thinking about that. And maybe you don't feel comfortable right now answering. And I went through those different 3 pieces quickly, but we are going to go into them more deeply here as I continue. And you'll be able to see all this in action as I start to model this for you. Thank you for participating in that and letting me know. Now, over the years, small group instruction, well, I should say guided reading, has been labeled with a variety of different small group names, if you will. Well, I'm pulling a small group. I just have a couple of kids in this group. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page and we have a clear, consistent understanding of what the heart of guided reading actually is. So I want us to examine the picture of excellence. This actually outlines the criteria for each component of the guided reading lesson plan. I have pages 6 and 7 in our participant guide. Tinley, would you confirm that for me on the participant guide and see if I'm correct on the page numbers? Okay. And what I would like for you to do, was I correct on my number or not?
I believe so, yes.
Perfect. So if you can open up your participant guide and just take a look at that picture of excellence, I want you to look at each of the before, the during, and the after section on that one document.
And I think somebody came in after so I'll put the participation guide one more time in the chat, just if you came in later. So everybody has a chance to look through it. Here you go.
I'll give you a minute to kind of take a look at that. As you're looking at each of the sections and looking at the criteria that's embedded in each of those sections, that's something that we at Scholastic, when we come in and we are coaching, we're observing, we have a discussion with teachers, we use that form all the time. Because if those things are in place, then you are truly following guided reading. As we continue to look through that document, I want you to notice that almost every sentence begins with the word students. You may or may not have noticed that. Now, this is because when we plan out our lessons, we're planning them with our students in mind. That's the whole purpose. We want for them to be engaged in all those different pieces and do all those different pieces. So yes, of course, we're planning out lesson plans because we need to know what to do, but we're always thinking about what the students need to do. So I would highly suggest, as you are writing out lesson plans, print off or have that picture of excellence next to you so you can kind of see if you have all those pieces in your lesson plan. All right. I'm going to take us into a video here in just a moment because I want us to watch a portion of a guided reading video in action. If you are like me, you like to see things in action and you learn by watching. And this is a great way for us to kind of see. It's just a portion. This is actually Maria Walther. She's one of our authors. And you're going to see her with a group. I want to say this is either a first or second grade group of students. But she's going to teach a guided reading lesson. We're going to see a portion of it. Have that, if you can, have your picture of excellence open next to you so that you can see the areas that she's addressing while we're watching this video. It's about 7 minutes long, but it's well worth our time. I apologize as I go into my thing here. And Tenley, would you just give me a thumbs up when you can hear it?
Yes,
Okay, I'm going to fast forward it just a bit.
I
Were you
can.
able to hear it?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
For groups reading at levels A through E, you'll open the lesson with an introduction and review of sight words.
We need the full screen, I think.
The group I'll be working with are all early readers at level I. We are no longer introducing or reviewing sight words, so the first part of this lesson will be a short gist statement. Provide readers with a gist statement to give them a bit of background knowledge about the text. Well, let me give you a little preview. This is a book of poems about different foods that animals eat. So we're going to take a preview through the book and look at a few things. So you go ahead and take a look and see what you see. Guide children to do a walkthrough of the book and to use illustrations to construct meaning and discuss what's going to happen. In this case, I wanted readers to understand the supportive structure of the rhyming poem to help them use both visual and meaning cues to decode unfamiliar words. What else can you expect about these poems?
It's poems about eating what animals eat.
Okay, and what about the words in the poem? Can you expect something from those words?
The rhyming words.
Also, introduce any unfamiliar vocabulary or concepts. Carnivorous means that they eat meat. Can you think of another animal that eats meat?
A deer. Lion.
A lion is carnivorous.
A cheetah.
A cheetah is carnivorous.
Dinosaurs.
A dinosaur is which kind of, are all dinosaurs carnivorous? No, just some are meat eaters, right? And some are
Plant eaters.
plant eaters. Invite readers to read independently and softly for about 5 to 8 minutes while you prompt and observe each student. These short interactions provide time for you to differentiate your instruction. I learned from analyzing the group's reading records that these readers are mainly relying on visual cues, so I choose to prompt them on using meaning cues and self-monitoring. Okay, let's see.
Koala decorates the trees, munching.
Wait, what helped you to figure that out? What did you do that helped you to figure that out?
I tried to read it, and then it got in my head. I was like, oh, it's munching. So I read it all over, and then I got it.
Okay, so you went back and you reread. That is a great strategy. That's what readers do. After reading, you will select a decoding, self-monitoring, fluency, vocabulary, or comprehension strategy based on your observations of the group. The prompts and teaching points chart will help you choose the appropriate strategy. So here we go. Here are 2 words from the book. And here's what I'm noticing. I'm noticing sometimes when you come to a word that's a tricky word, you're trying to sound it out all together. And a better strategy for that is to do it in chunks. So can you look at this top word and tell me a chunk that...
I'll look for chunks.
You're right. We did that before all together. So now we're going to do it together in guided reading. I target Common Core reading standards when I plan my comprehension conversations. In this case, I'm focusing on Standard 5 for Grade 1. Which states that children should be able to explain the major differences between books that tell stories and those that give information. Here's my big question for you. Do you think this book is fiction or nonfiction?
Nonfiction.
Okay, tell me why you're thinking that. Let's let someone start. Darius, you want to start our thinking? Listen to Darius.
Because it's a real book.
Okay.
And it's telling you what animals eat.
What are you thinking, Tess? Look at your friend Tess.
I agree with you because it's like a learning book that tells you about all the animals, what they eat, but it tells you in a poem.
So Tess added that extra part to your thinking. Did you hear what Tess said? She said, yeah, she agrees that it's a learning book, but it's also a poem, isn't it? I choose to use analogy charts because the students' reading records show that although they rely on some visual cues, like beginning sounds, they aren't looking through words to the end. In addition, I know from Step 2, the Developmental Word Knowledge Inventory, that they all need extra practice with consonant blends, so I included words that would reinforce that skill. Okay, next word. Next word is blame. Blame.
Blame?
Don't blame your brother. Blame. Okay, Darius, say the word for me. Ready? Let's say it together. Blame. Do you hear another letter in that word? Blame. What do you hear? Nice job, my friend. Do you notice something?
That the two words that you just said, chap and blame, they're two blendings.
Okay, so we have the ch, the digraph ch.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, I will do day 2 of the lesson plan and see if children are applying what they learned on day 1 about chunking words and using analogies. Instead of word study, we will do guided writing, where students will write a short response to help extend their comprehension and practice phonetic principles. You will find detailed procedures for guided writing in the teacher's guide.
Okay, perfect. While I go to my other screen, if you wouldn't mind reflecting on that video, what was helpful to see? What questions do you have? What things are you already doing? Can you see my screen, Tinley?
Yes, I can see it.
Perfect, thank you. If anybody would like to come off mute, you're welcome to do that, or you can pop it into the chat.
I can share. I thought it was interesting that Maria said that she used the Common Core standards to choose her comprehension questions during the after.
It's interesting. Every time I see this, I always pick up on something else. And Audra, I too was like, oh my gosh, I must have missed that some other time. Yes, I thought that was interesting too. She retired last year, a classroom teacher. So she really, I think, geared this video towards that. I'm not sure why, but I agree with you. I thought that was interesting.
Well, I think it's maximizing what you can do at, the guided reading time. So it's not in isolation, you're incorporating what you're already doing within the classroom.
Right.
So.
Glad you picked up on that. Anyone else?
Haley was mentioning that she's already encouraging students to use skills like chunking the words, and we have these skills on a poster near our table. So that is fantastic.
That's so helpful, because just as you saw in this video, you saw the student turn around and say, oh, we're already doing that. So they're making that connection. So it's not anything new with the guided reading table. That's very important to know. Thanks, Haley, for pointing that out. At the guided reading table, there is no new instruction happening. So if you're going to take anything away from today, I want you to be thinking about that. I am not going to teach anything new at the guided reading table. It's going to be a reinforcement and application of the skills that we've already done in whole class. That's where really the practice comes in, because if you're teaching something new, you're not going to be able to individualize within your small group. Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, so let's now dive in to each section of guided reading a little bit more deeply. We're going to talk about its purpose, the process, and the daily use in the classroom. So now I'm going to take us back to where we were. I went through those slides quite quickly. I'm going to go in a little bit more deeply now. So the very first step of any guided reading lesson is very careful planning. You're going to assess your students. And after you assess your students, you will place them into groups of 4 to 6. You're not going to have any more than 6 students in a guided reading group. Yes, that might mean that you have more guided reading groups, but it's really important to keep our groups small so that we're really addressing the needs of the student. So your students here in this small group, they're going to be reading around the same level with similar reading needs. Then you're going to carefully select the text. That comes next. Choosing a specific text to address each of your group's needs is going to help your students learn and practice those skills that they need to develop as readers. Now, I'm sure I'm not saying anything new, but multiple texts exist at a similar reading level. What I mean by that is that they may be complex in a different way. You may have 10 different level J books, but each level J book is going to be different than the other one. That's called text complexity. So as we start to begin with our lesson planning, we have to carefully select that text so that it allows you to work on one instructional focus. We want them to practice that skill and to build on it. So you're only picking one instructional focus, selecting that text that's going to address that instructional focus, and then practice that within that text. So what makes text complex? Well, let's take a look at that here. Your text selection means looking at things that more than just the quantitative aspects of language. It means you're going to be looking at other important pieces that are going to inform your students' interactions with literature. Are they making a connection to the text? Do they have some kind of tie to vocabulary? There are only so many books that your students are going to be able to read in school. So I'm telling you, choice matters. Be picky, be choosy when you pick that book. All right, you have the right to do that. There are 3 different components that we need to consider when we're evaluating that text complexity. This is important. When you go and you pull a book to look at, I want you to be looking at these 3 different things. First off, the quantitative. That's pretty easily measured. How many words there are, the difficulty of the vocabulary and the sentences. Qualitative, not as easily measured. These things are things like figurative language. How do the illustrations relate to the meaning of the text, the theme? We're going to be considering all that. And what I think holds as much weight as the other 2 is the reader and the task. That's just as important. The level of background knowledge that your students bring to the table as a reader is huge. If you live in an area that doesn't have any snow, yet you're reading a book about snow, I want you to think about that. I'm not saying don't read about it. I'm saying you're going to have to front load some information. They may have a complete disconnect to the book, and that's going to take away from your instructional focus. So there's different leveling systems that we use to help evaluate that text complexity and the text of the reader that we're going to put them in. We use guided reading levels. That's a direct correlation with F&P. That's a direct correlation with the F&P system. So if you're familiar with that, we're speaking apples to apples. These guided reading levels, they're going to serve as a guide rail for evaluating what text, how complex a text is. So I think we have a correlation chart, do we not, Tenley, in our participation guide?
Yes, we do.
I have page 4, is that correct?
Let me check here. Yes, correlation guide, let's see.
Should be page 4. I want you to open up your participation guide and look at that correlation chart. And I want you to really just think about, I want you to look at the guided reading levels. I want you to look at the grade level that you teach. And I want you to think about, okay, in the grade level that I teach, this is kind of where the kiddos need to be, right? It's a roundabout, a guide rail. But where, I want you to think about a specific group of students. Where are they? Where are those students? Where do they fall on that?
I think it's at page 11, not
Thank
4.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Page 11. Thank you, Tenley. And then I want you to look at the characteristics. The characteristics for that level are what students need to know within that guided reading level. That should be on the following pages. Take a moment to look at that. What do you notice? I want to hear what you notice about that, the text characteristics with the level of students that you're thinking about, that group.
Yeah, that's on page 12. And
thank you, Tenley.
yeah, starting on page 12 down are the text characteristics.
Perfect. What are some of the behaviors that we need to be looking at as we're working with a group? That's what I want you to be looking at on those pages.
Okay.
Give me your thoughts once you've taken a look at that. Who can come off mute? Tell us a guided reading level of a group that you're thinking about, and what are some of those characteristics that you noticed in your participant guide?
And I'm sending the participant guide to the person who just came in, just, you know.
Thank you.
I have a group of students on level G. And so that's the level I'm thinking of. And I noticed right away it talks about how the books are no longer repetitive, which I didn't like really realize until I read it, that there is kind of a stage in which the lower levels are more repetitive. And then I also noticed that one of the things they should be working on is like rereading the words specifically to self-correct. I can kind of see when some of my students don't go back to self-correct. And so when they get up to that level G, like that's a behavior to notice.
Thank you so much, Haley. And that is going to be key, because what happens if a student doesn't go back and reread from the beginning of the sentence, I call that getting a running start, right? They kind of, they're going, and then they get stuck on a word. And they read the word, but then they don't go back and get a running start. So it's a hit and miss, and that could interfere with comprehension and meaning. So that's going to be very, very important. Again, keep those behaviors to notice, those characteristics right next to you. When you are working with a group, open it up. There's nothing wrong with you have your lesson plan and you have your text characteristics right there next to you. So you already anticipate what could potentially happen, things that you need to work on. And what it's really nice, Haley, I'll use you as an example. You have your group at level G. You can look at level H and see what they're already going to need to know before they get to level H, right? So that is almost like front loading in your own brain, like, oh gosh, I need to make sure I have all of these things in place for these kiddos so that they're ready for level H. Anything else surprising to anyone that they may have noticed on those pages? That is okay if you don't want to come off mute just yet. I hope you're looking through those pages and you're processing those things. It's a lot of information. I'm not going to lie to you. There's a lot of information here today, right? But we're going to work through it together. So now we're going to build a lesson plan together. I'm going to model how to write a lesson plan using a short read. Now, a short read is because we don't all have a common book in front of us. You will find 2 short reads for today's session in your handout. Short reads, they're essentially, you can use them for close reading. They're essentially excerpts from a book. And they're a powerful resource to use with your guided reading group because you can go deeper with vocabulary, reading, and meaning as your students read, reread. They're going to analyze the text multiple times over multiple days. But that was the easiest way for me to kind of get us all the same text. So what I would like for you to do is to open up your participant guide, and you're going to find the elves and the shoemaker, and I'll tell you where that is in just a moment. So let's start our lesson plan work together as I model for you with the before section of guided reading. All right, I already have, pretend with me, I already have my group. I assess them and I put them into a like group, and now I'm ready to create my lesson plan. So here in the before section of our guided reading lesson plan, we're going to provide a book introduction. We're going to introduce some vocabulary, preview any decoding potential struggles. And I'm going to introduce and model the instructional focus. What is it that I want students to be able to do by the time we're finished with our lesson? Now, the key to the before reading section of our guided reading lesson plan is scaffolding. We need to scaffold this. There's a delicate balance though, with how much information are we going to provide so that we're not taking away the heavy lifting from them, because ultimately we want them to independently apply those new skills to the text. If I sit here and I start thinking about, okay, well, every time they get to a word they don't know, I'm just going to give it to them. Well, we're going to take away that heavy lifting. But if I know that there's a word that they're not going to be able to get through context, I know that they're not going to be able to sound it out, that might be a word that I need to front load for them. And then what I think is probably the most difficult part, now this is just me in this section, is keeping the section brief, efficiency. We want to spend the bulk of the time in the actual reading. So this portion right now, my friends, this is actually only 3 to 5 minutes. This section is only 3 to 5 minutes. Before reading, 3 to 5 minutes, nail it down. If you're a talker like me, guess what? Use a timer. That's going to really help you a lot. Okay, so before I model this before reading section, let's review. We're going to provide an introduction. We're going to determine what the instructional focus is going to be. I'm going to determine what the vocabulary, which vocabulary needs to be front loaded, and I'm going to set up a purpose for reading. We'll use those text characteristics, that chart, to support us when we're to kind of be thinking about how we're going to select a comprehension focus and an instructional focus. So those behaviors to notice in that text characteristic, that's going to help us when we're determining why are we doing this. So I believe it's page 16 of your participant guide. That's the teacher copy. Page 18 of your participant guide should be the student copy of The Elves and the Shoemaker. This is a transitional lesson plan. So this text that we're looking at is going to be a level J. I realize that not all of your students are at a level J. However, I'm trying to hit everybody, all the different grade levels as we move through today. So earlier, I just showed you, I think it was an I, so now we're going to try and do a J here, different reading level. All right, I'm going to start off by modeling a think aloud process. I'm going to use The Elf and the Shoemaker, and as I start to fill in the lesson plan, I want you to feel free, maybe you want to jot down notes if you don't have it printed off, feel free to jot down notes on a sticky note or a piece of paper so that you can go back in and fill out this lesson plan if you like. So we're only going to be working on the before section. The before section right here is the part that has the arrows around it, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is whether I have an actual book or I have a short read, I'm going to read the entire thing twice. Now I know some of you are like, Blanca, I read a chapter book. How in the world am I going to do that? Well, you're only going to read the section that you're going to teach on for the next day. So if you're doing a chapter book and you're only going to focus on pages 8 through 10 or 8 through 15, only read that section. That's going to help you digest it a little bit more. I find that close reading, short reads, they tend to be at a little bit of a higher text complexity because they offer the opportunity to go deeper into the learning. So take that into consideration if you ever use these. The first time we're going to read the short read, the text, we're just going to read it for the basic plot and the flow. Does this text really do what I want it to do? Is it appropriate for my group? You might pull a book and say, oh gosh, this is fantastic. And then you read it and you're like, that's not really, it's not going to do what I need it to do for my students. Okay, so that's number one, make sure it's appropriate. The second time you go through it, you're going to analyze it for its text complexity. Gosh, you know what? This has a lot of quotation marks in it, and I haven't even taught quotation marks yet. Might not be a good text for me to use right now. Not saying that it ever won't be, not saying don't ever pick a text that doesn't have quotation marks in it. I'm just saying that each level will have its different purpose. All right, so think about what your purpose is for your kiddos. Okay, so we're going to start with an introduction. And we're going to point out any background information noted if you have a teaching card or any note on the teaching card if you use teaching cards. Do you, Audra, do y'all have teaching cards with some of your text, just so I know what I'm...
Most sites have the leveled book room. So we do have teaching cards. There are a couple that do not.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to the sites that have the teaching card. For those of you that don't, just think of how this can apply, right? So if you have a teaching card, you're going to pull out some background information. A lot of that is on your teaching card. For those of you that don't have the leveled book rooms, well, go ahead and pull out some background information about what you just read on the text and give that information to the students. So just by looking at the short read that you should have in front of you, you might notice that on the student copy, there's a boxed introduction. It's up at the top of that short read. Students might not be used to seeing that. And every piece of the text is going to be important to include when we're reading. So that's a text feature, something that we might have to introduce prior to reading. Maybe that's something that you do whole class. you pull out another book that has that type of text feature, right? We don't want something that's brand new. They're like, oh my gosh, what is this? So we need to make sure that we have that in mind when pulling this text. Students are going to read the entire text. If I'm doing a short read right now, your students would read the whole text. For those of you that have the leveled book room, you have short reads in your book, in your leveled book room. You're welcome. This is exciting. So they'll read the whole text. If you're using a text like a book, they may not read the whole book that first go round. So those are things you're going to have to consider. Now, as they're reading, they may encounter some words that need to be front loaded. I've chosen in this story, The Elves and the Shoemaker, I'm going to front load these words. I'm going to introduce these words. I'm going to introduce the word shoemaker. I'm going to introduce the word stitch. I'm going to introduce the word leather, and I'm going to introduce the word cozy, because already in my brain, I'm like, I don't want that to slow them down, not because they couldn't sound it out or read it, but because I don't want it to interfere with their meaning. So for the first read, it's going to be important for those students to understand what makes the characters unique. If that's what I want them to do, I want them to think about what makes the characters unique. I don't want them to stumble across those 4 words that I'm going to front load. Okay. And we're not going to just read this text one time. We're going to read it multiple days. So I might even ask them, think about what happened at the beginning, what happened in the middle, what happened in the end. Do you all have Jan's yellow book, Audra?
Most participants do. School sites have them as well. So that at least there'd be some access to them.
What's really nice is if you notice on the front of this lesson plan right here on the screen, there's a comprehension focus as well. So not only are you asking your students to do something particular, so I want you to be thinking about what makes the characters unique. I also want you to be thinking what happened in the beginning, the middle, and the end. So in the back of your yellow book, Jan's book, you actually have yellow comprehension cards all the way in the back. You have a whole slew of them, and they're wonderful when you're like, well, gosh, Blanca, what in the world am I going to use for a comprehension focus? I might pull out Jan's beginning, middle, and end comprehension card and show it to the kids and say, I want you to be thinking about the beginning, middle, and end as you're reading this story. Because we're just not reading to read the words. We're going to give them 2 things that they have to actually do. So while students are reading, I would like for them to think about the characters and what makes them unique and special. And with that in place, we're going to go ahead and fill out the first part of our lesson plan. So this is what it would look like. I have the title of my short read and the level. I have my strategy focus right here. I want them to think about character traits. That's my strategy focus. What makes the characters unique? And then in addition, I want them to think about what's happening in the beginning, the middle, and the end of that short read. I'm going to tell them that. I also, if you have a short read, if not, you're going to have to put this in your own words. There's a spot for the synopsis. I put that in there. I typed that in there. I literally took what was on the short read and I put it in my own words so that I can tell the students what this story is going to be about. I'm also going to front load these 4 words. There are 4 boxes. You don't have to have 4 words, okay? Just so you know. You can have 2 words. You can have 3 words. I wouldn't do any more than 4 though, all right? Because that's just going to be too much. And then I am going to model a stop and think about where it is better to give or receive. That's going to directly tie to what makes the character unique. I'm going to actually model that. All right. I'm going to model, hey, when we get to this certain point in our story, I want you to stop and think, is it better to be a giver or a receiver? And you have to tell me why. So if I'm listening to Audra read, I'm going to ask her that question so I want you to be thinking about that. Okay. All right. That's the first part. We've already planned our before. We've already planned our before section. So I want to pause for a moment and ask, what questions do you have about the before section of the lesson plan? I selected my text. I knew where my students were. So I was able to look at my text characteristics, my behaviors that I need to be keeping an eye on. I know what my kids need. So I plop those into my strategy focus and my comprehension focus. I knew what words they might interfere with their comprehension, or I felt I needed to front load. They might not know the word cozy, and maybe those aren't the words that you would choose. Those are the words that I chose. So if you feel that there are other words that are more beneficial, then you can choose different ones. Okay, if questions come up, I'm having pause points and I want you to pop those into the chat, okay? I know we're going over a lot, but I am going to move to the after reading portion of our lesson plan. You're probably saying, what in the world happened to the during, Blanca? Well, I am going to walk you through the after portion because the before and the after are most closely related and the most closely connected when we're planning. Because if you remember what I said, the during portion is the heart. That's the heart of guided reading. That's where we don't have to do a whole bunch of planning. So I'm going to come back to that. Okay, the before and the after, they're closely connected and they need the most upfront planning. And the after section also has our wrap up. That's our wrap up piece. So we need to make sure we have that in place. So let's take a look here. In our after reading, students are going to do a retell. They're not going to retell the whole thing, but we're going to ask them specific questions. We're going to have a teaching point. So based on how I heard you all read in our small group, I'm going to either reinforce something or give you kudos and a pat on the back. So if I really heard Audra stopping and thinking, wow, I really like how this character did such and such, I'm going to praise her for that at this point. If I didn't hear any of my group doing that, I might take us back into the text and point out a place where we can think about unique characteristics of that character, because that's what I wanted you to do. And then again, this is a place where we can complete our word study or writing. Again, a lot of the word study and writing, depending on what level we're at, might not take place on day one, and that is okay. We can move that to day 2, right? We don't, too much isn't necessarily good. We kind of want to go slow in this, right? Okay, so let's take a look here, our after reading goals. There are 2 main goals that we want to accomplish in the after section of a guided reading lesson plan. First, it's going to be very helpful to engage in a discussion about what students read. So this is going to directly tie to that instructional focus that we set at the beginning of the lesson plan. I want you to be ready to ask some follow-up questions to help students continue to expand their thinking and their dialogue. I don't want us to just ask yes/no questions. Be thinking about those next level questions. The second goal is to reinforce any reading skill or instruction that may be needed based on what you observed when you were listening to your kiddos read. That you might have to reteach something. You might have to reteach that skill because they just didn't do it. They didn't have enough practice yet. They couldn't quite do it yet, the power of yet. Or this might be a great way to celebrate their success. I really like the way that you did whatever it is. Okay, folks, here comes our time. This too is only 3 to 5 minutes. Now, you might think, oh gosh, that's a lot of stuff to get done in the after section. This is why we might save our writing and our word study for day 2. Now, I want to caution you on that. You will never hear me say, all right, if you don't have time on it during day 2 to move it again. We're going to have time to do one. We're going to have one or the other or both on day 2. We're not going to keep pushing it because it's part of guided reading. But on day 1, it's really a cold read. They really haven't had any exposure to the text. So this is where we really want to try and understand what they know about the text. So that is that's your little permission to push your writing and or your word study to day 2, but only to day 2. Okay, here we go. Now, the questions that we can ask in our after section, they will fall into 3 categories. And what a beautiful thing, if you do have the leveled book room, those teaching cards have questions already for you. They're on the back side of the teaching card. They're kind of in a grade box, and they are within, about, and beyond the text questions. Now, are these the end all be all questions? No, because who are we at Scholastic to say you have to ask these questions? What I would like to say is, friends, don't reinvent the wheel. If you see some questions that you think are appropriate for your group, then don't redo anything. Take some of those questions and ask them. I am suggesting that you ask 2 to 3 questions. Maybe pick one from within the text, pick one about the text, and pick one from beyond the text, to really kind of dip their toes into just learning what do they really know about the text that they read. The next day, when you come back and revisit the text again, you can pick other questions from the back of that card as well. Now, if you're saying already, that's all fine and dandy, Blanca, but I don't have those wonderful cards, then I want you to think about the depth of knowledge type questions. DOK 1, pick a yes or no, a very easily answered question, pick a level 2 question, really provide an opportunity to deepen their thinking. This is the time that we can do that. All right, these are some of the questions that we might ask. So if I'm going to add to my lesson plan, and I'm thinking about the after reading portion, I'm going to begin with a question that comes from the within the text box. I might ask, why do you think the elves chose to help? Or how do they know what the shoemaker needs help? How do they know that the shoemaker needs help? I might pick one of those questions. All right. I want to be sure that the students understand the gist of what we were reading. These type of questions are those right there questions. They can go back into the text and find the answers. The next type of questions are about the text questions. These questions are going to help students remember to use both the words and the pictures to help them understand the text. Here are some examples. Why do you think the elves work at night when the shoemaker and his wife are asleep? Where do you think the elves go during the day? These are going to help us just kind of really focus back on what our goal is. And finally, pick a question from the beyond the text. These are going to be questions that students can make connections to, either personally or maybe text to text connections. These might be some examples of questions that I would ask here. Again, I would probably pick 2 to 3 questions. If you feel like you have time and you want to ask a 4th question, you can absolutely do that. Now, for my friends that have the short reads in hand, they have a leveled book room, you have the short reads, this is actually where you're going to find those questions. Okay, you can access them online, you can access them on the card itself. You do have a snapshot of that. You have the teacher card in your participant guide, and you have a student copy in there too, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. It actually lays it out right there for you. I have them boxed in red, but it has the section called Guided Close Reading and Revisit the Text. Those are some ideas for the types of questions that you could ask. Okay. All right. Now, what does our after section of the lesson plan look like? Well, we're going to look right here at the after portions indicated by those arrows. We're going to be looking at the discussion prompt. These are based on 3 types of questions. I have chosen describe how the shoemaker, his wife, and the elves all get along. These all come from the questions that I just showed you. Okay, these are the questions that I just showed you. So I'm going to go ahead, or excuse me, these are some questions that I'm going to ask our students. Why does the shoemaker and his wife sew new clothes for the elves? How do the elves react to them? I might even go deeper with my questioning on the next day. We have our teaching points here. This section 4 is our teaching point. So I actually would like for students to use known word parts if they get stuck on a word. So I don't want them to just sit there. I want them to read fluently. I want them to maybe chunk up words so they can really understand those character traits. So again, here you are just selecting a couple of boxes as you're planning your lesson. Now I want to caution you, you might get to delivering the lesson And you might say, my gosh, these teaching points were not really what I needed, but you thought you did. It's okay to change those up as you're teaching. That's okay. That's what good teachers do, right? We have to change things up as we're going. If we feel like it's not going the way that we want it to, and we need to ask, we need to look at different prompts, go ahead and do that. Absolutely. This is going to be on your lesson plan, which is also in your participant guide, because I know it's a little bit small here. And then again, once I get to word study, and you can see right here, it's already set out for day 2, I might ask students to write about their favorite character. If I'm doing a word study, that's for the writing piece. If I'm doing the word study here, I might do an analogy chart. So based on the skills that I know students can do, and again, those strategies are all listed in your yellow book. This is actually one of the suggested strategies. It starts on page 289 in your yellow book. They're called strategies and skills. And I think that 289 actually starts on the very basic level. That's guided reading level A, but find your guided reading level, and it will give you word study activities that you can use for sound boxes, for your analogy charts, for making a big word. Again, don't reinvent the wheel. See exactly where your students are at. If they're at a level J, I'm going to flip through my yellow book. I'm going to find some activities to do within that level J. I'm going to pick the one that's most appropriate, and look at the time. I don't have a lot of time here, right? So I need to pick something that I'm going to be able to get in and out. We're going to do a quick in, a quick out. This is not going to be a huge, long lesson. And when we look at our after section filled out a little bit bigger so you can see it, it looks something like this. So I have my discussion prompts that I've chosen. I chose here in my teaching points. So if I'm reading with Audra and she's struggling on a word, I'm going to say to her, find part of the word that you already know, Audra. You already know this piece of the word. So chunk it up if that's what you want to call it, whatever you know, cover up part of the word. But that's what I'm going to suggest, right? And same with our vocabulary. So you're going to pick these based on what you know about that particular group. And then you're going to select your word study. I know it says for day 2, you are going to do it on day 2, but plan for that. Even when you're starting on day 1, plan for it so you already know in your head, this is where I'm going. All right, I'm going to pause again. After this section, that's a lot of information. Questions, comments, connections, things you've already done?
I will just share that it looks overwhelming at first because there's a lot, but once you start doing a couple of lessons, it does become routine in how you write this. So I just want to give that out to our staff members.
And I want you to know, let me tell you this. I'm looking directly at you, not in the camera because all your pictures are over here on the right-hand side. So I want you to know, my new friends here, start small. If I were there with you and I was coaching you, I would say, let's start small. What do you feel most comfortable with? Is there a piece that you feel a little bit most comfortable with? Let's go ahead and expand on that. And then I am going to ask you to dip your toes into the uncomfortable zone. Be comfortable with the uncomfortable. That's how we're going to learn. It is not going to be a well-oiled machine at the beginning. It's not. So go slow to go fast. Work on just grouping your students, number 1. Work on learning what do they need. Okay, I know they need inflectional endings. My kids are at a level J, and every time they come to the word with an ED, they say ed. They say jumped, they say stopped, they say hopped. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've taught the 3 different sounds to that inflectional ending and they're not getting it. I'm going to go to the book room, or I'm going to find a book that has a lot of double consonant with ED endings. And that's the book that we're going to read. And that's what I'm going to focus on. So now you've selected your text and you have your instructional focus. If you can start with those 2 and feel comfortable about that piece, then you can go ahead the next week, add on another piece. Okay, we're going to start where we're at, And then we're just going to add on little bits and pieces, having an end goal, right? Not by the end of the school year are we going to get there. I mean, we're going to get there sooner than later because we need to do what's good for kids, but start where you're at and start in small chunks. So thanks, Audra, for pointing that out, because I know, please, I hope you haven't shut off your camera because you're like, this is overwhelming, Blanca. It is, and that's okay. That's why I'm going to keep coming back to small baby steps, baby steps, baby steps.
And
Okay,
Haley,
yes.
Haley wanted you to explain the analogy chart.
Oh, of course. So the analogy charts are toward the back of your book, and they're 2 columns. And again, you would pick 2 different and not the same word endings, word patterns, if you will. So you wouldn't pick like I have the OI. You would not pick OI and OY and do an analogy chart with that. You would not. So I have IT and OI. So envision a piece of paper and you have a line like a T-chart, essentially. On one side, I would have IGHT and I would have OI on the other side. Now thinking, these are some of the word patterns we've already practiced in class. So now I have a list of words and I only have, I don't know, maybe 6 total words that we're going to go over. And I would say something like this to my students. Boys and girls, we're going to look at 2 different word patterns today. One is IT, IGHT, and the other one is OI, which makes the OI sound. OI, okay? And I'm going to give you some words. And you are going to determine which side of the paper does it go under. Does it go under OI or does it go under IT? And then you're going to write the word and underline the word pattern. So the first word is bright. So your students would have either the analogy chart in front of them, because you can print it off, or a whiteboard. They can have a whiteboard as well. And they will write the word bright. Now, what are they only responsible for? Actually, just the blend at the beginning, right? Listening to that brr sound for bright, because IT is already listed on the analogy chart. So they would write out the word bright, make sure it's under the correct column, and they would underline the IGHT. Then I would give them another word. Sometimes I tend to go back and forth while they're learning, right? So I might do an OI as in soil. All right, now we're going to write the word soil. Where's it going to go? So they put it under the OI. They write the word soil and they underline the OI word pattern. After we have all of our words written, so you can see I have bright, mighty, lightly, soil, moist, unspoiled, I would have them read the words, right? So we would read them together, and it's just as quick as that. Now, if you're looking for a model of that, there is a model of that in Jan's yellow book. So on the inside front cover, you're going to have the website, okay? The password to that is results, RESULTS. Get on there, look at the videos, and you can see her modeling all of these different things, anything under word study. You can see her doing sound boxes, analogy charts, making a big word. You can see any part of the lesson plan, actually, she models it.
I'm glad you knew that, Blanca, because, oh, sorry.
Sorry, Tenley.
Oh, I was just saying, I'm glad you mentioned that because I did say there's great videos, but I just wasn't quite sure where they were. So that's good. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yes. Haley, did that help? Awesome. Okay, here we go. So I stopped for questions and we're going to move on to my favorite part, the heart of guided reading. That's why I threw in a heart over there. This is the final component of guided reading. This is the heart of it all, the big daddy, what we want to spend our most of our time in. This is where students are reading and you have the opportunity to learn more about them as a reader. What can they do independently? Where do they need continued support? And conferring is a sacred part of guided reading. This is a part where your students, as I said, are reading independently. They are reading at their own pace. You might have noticed that in the video, Maria was conferring and talking with one of the students while the other ones, they were reading at their own pace. So if I have you all 4 of you in my group and I'm reading with Tenley, the rest of you are reading on your own. When I'm done reading with Tenley, I'm going to pick up wherever Audra is reading and I'm going to say, all right, go ahead, Audra, wherever you are, go ahead and start reading. I'm going to prompt them if needed. So if she gets stuck on a word, I'm going to give her some clues. I might confer with her and ask her something specific. What's your favorite part? What do you think so far? Anything surprising to you? I'm doing these little informal assessments as well. On the back side of Jan Richardson's lesson plan, again, towards the back of your yellow book are Jan's plans. On the back side is an opportunity for you to jot down notes. It gives you kind of like these 4 boxes. You can write the names of your students in there and jot down notes, because we all think we're going to be able to remember it. We won't. We will not be able to remember it. In our during reading portion, we want to make sure that we're setting the total number of pages that we want a student to read. So with a short read, of course, I'm going to have them read the front and the back of the short read. But if you're reading a book, you can divide that book over multiple days. So you may only read a certain part on day 1, and that's okay. And you may be reading a chapter book and it may take you 2 weeks to get through it. That's absolutely okay. That's not a problem, because we're all moving ahead together. So you'll want to set the total number of pages before you have your students read. Boys and girls, today we're only reading up to page 8. And you might want to even put a sticky note on that page for them. They're going to be reading independently. You might be able to confer with 2 or 3 students. You might not be able to confer with all of your students in that group every day. That's okay. So have a system. If I was only able to talk to Tenley and Audra today, that's all right. Tomorrow I'll be able to talk with Haley and somebody else. So the purpose really is to guide the reader. You want to guide your reader rather than teaching them. So be ready with some questions. That's why you need to have those questions already written down. So a lot of the preparation for the during reading portion comes from what questions am I going to ask? So we're going to be listening for that decoding, the fluency, the prosody. And when you're listening to a student read, again, they're going to pick up wherever they are. You can go ahead and make notes of that on the back side of your lesson plan. So as we start to look at the during reading portion of our lesson plan here, I am focused right here on the part where there's an arrow. We are doing a lot of anticipating. So we're going to anticipate what behaviors we might hear or see from a student while they're reading. We still need to plan for the section because we have to have our prompts ready, and we want to tie them to the instructional focus. But you're just not limited to these areas that are here. These are just giving you some ideas. So the during reading portion, dun, 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 ready for this, is 8 to 10 minutes. This is the heart of guided reading. This is where 60% of our time is going to be spent. For my mathematicians in the group, that should equate to approximately 20 minutes. Now with my upper grade levels, I know we have a 6th grade teacher on here. I don't know if we have anything higher. Even for my 5th grade, if you feel you need to go up to 30 minutes, great. I wouldn't go any longer than that. Really guided reading, 20 to 30 minutes. I know I got a kinder teacher on here where my heart is going to build up stamina, my friend. We're going to build up stamina. So you might only start at 10 minutes. And that is okay, because we have little squirrely birds in all grade levels, and we want to get the most out of our time together. So we're going to build up that stamina. Essentially, we want to try and get to 20 to 30 minutes. Okay. And what does our during reading section look like after it is filled in? Well, it looks like this. It's pretty darn basic. However, what you do notice is that I was anticipating what students might do. I'm already thinking my group, I know that they're going to substitute a word that doesn't make sense, because I've heard them read before. They said hopped. And when they get to hopped, I'm going to let them read the sentence, and then I'm going to ask them, now, does that make sense, or stop it? I stopped at the end of the road. I don't know. That doesn't make sense. How can you figure out that word? Now, you might remember that we have 3 different sounds for ED, and you can state those. Which one would make most sense here? Okay. Again, we're also going to have a comprehension prompt. If you remember, I want to know what makes the characters unique. So as I'm reading with one of you, I might ask you, why do you think the character said that? Why do you think that character did that? That was kind of funny. And we're going to have a little discussion, because I'm just not going to listen to them read. I'm going to ask them something as well. I'm checking in for comprehension. Is once again time for your wonderful questions about the during portion. I know some of my friends at the beginning said the during portion was a little bit difficult. That was the most challenging part, right? The most challenging component to plan for. Some of my friends said the after portion was the most difficult portion, challenging portion to plan for. So this is what I want you to think about. And if you have questions, I will gladly take them. If you are familiar with Zoom, great. If you're not, I'm going to tell you how to do this. I want you to annotate. I want you to hover over the top of your screen, and you're going to either click more or view options, whatever it says at the top. Yes, Haley, I see you with your hand up. I'm so glad you're like right there in front of me because I only have 4 pictures. You're on mute, my friend.
I was wondering, when students are reading the text, if they're not a student that you're conferring with, when they're done reading the text, is the appropriate thing for them to just read it again? Like if they're a
Yes.
speed reader?
Super great question. So yes, and if they're even in lower grades, you can do this. Maybe you want them to use a sticky note and place it in the text where they might have a question, or they might have something that they want to share they're excited about. So even my kinder teacher, they can take a sticky note and they can draw a little dot for an exclamation point, or maybe a question mark, and they can place it someplace in the text where they have a question or they're excited. But yes, to go back and read. For my older kiddos, my higher readers, if you will, maybe they want to jot down a sentence that they are excited about. So the answer to that is yes. And does that help?
Yes. I noticed some of my students as well, like when they're reading close next to each other, they're kind of paying attention to what page their neighbor's on. So do you have any tips for like slowing them down while they're reading?
So that is very common. And all I can suggest is routine, and practice. So maybe even, and I know we're already separated, right? Because of the situation that we're in, but talk to them about that. Talk to them and just say, boys and girls, you're not going to get a prize for finishing first. That's what I always used to say to my first graders. There's no prize for finishing first. Really, I want to hear you read. So I want you to read at your own pace, and I want you to understand. I know your neighbor may be ahead of you or behind you, and you're super excited about what I'm asking, but let's practice just on zoning in on your own text. Have you ever used whisper phones before? Okay, whisper phones are really great for that because they're actually hearing themselves, and it helps to block out the other person that's reading next to them. That might be a suggestion, but I would say just practice with that and hope. And I don't know, maybe you're saying, Blanca, I've already done that. But I just tell them, I know that you're listening, and it's hard when your friend is reading. So maybe you might want to have the one that's reading pull their chair over and really just whisper, and you lean in a little bit more so that you can really hear them. So maybe it's not as distracting to some of the others. What I would like for you to do right now is I want you to look at the before, during, and after section of this lesson plan. This may or may not be the lesson plan that you're familiar with, number one, or the one that you're going to use, but I want you to place a stamp next to the section that you feel more comfortable with now. Which one do you feel more comfortable, or you have a better understanding? So hover over the top of your screen, click either more or view options, click annotate, and then choose a stamp and place that little puppy right next to before, during, and after. And if you don't have this feature, just go ahead and pop it into the chat. That is absolutely okay. Okay, somebody is saying that they feel better with before, they feel a little better with during. And Natalie, you found that starting them at different times, like every other student, yeah, that might help too. So a little bit better with during here. Nobody's feeling better with after. You're still like, what? Okay. Thanks, Christy. I love that little smiley face. Perfect. Feeling a little bit better with during. Okay. So with the after portion, I'm going to tell you, I know that it seems like there is a lot in there. Plan. Use your yellow book. use the cards. Use the cards. They're going to help you, because this right here, my friends, is not a trick. It's not a trick area. Right here, I'll tell you the discussion prompts. Boom. They're done for you if you have those cards. They are done for you. Go ahead and take the questions off of there. The teaching points here, all you are doing is ones for whatever you're looking at, the during portion here, what they were successfully able to do or what they weren't able to do. We're just going to reinforce that. And then the word study, you're going to use that yellow book. Flip to the back of the book and determine what are some of those word study activities. Okay, so do we have some virtual teachers on? We got some virtual teachers on, don't we? Okay, so if you have access to the to our yellow book, if you have, or excuse me, to your, do they have access to the Leveled Book Room online, Audra?
They do not. They are going to be using Reading A to Z. And I was just talking to a colleague, if the titles end up being the same, then we have access to the cards for them, but we don't know yet.
Okay, so you're probably not going to have any you're probably not going to have anything with A to Z and us, but if we can get them their accelerator access, that would be really good. Again, from what I know with Reading A to Z, my friends, you can project those books onto the screen. Those are, you're going to have to carefully select some of those questions because I'm not sure what those questions look like. So you might find, and I don't know, so you might find ones that are surface level questions. Use your best teaching and professional practice that you know of. Take those surface level questions, if that's what they are, and go deeper. How can I take it to the next step? How can I take it to the next level? So I'm not just asking them, who were the characters? What was the setting? You know, give me the 5, the what, where, when, why, how, or take it to the next level. Your best resource, honest to goodness, is going to be using your yellow book. Take that yellow book, dive into it, look at some of the videos, look at the resources that you have access to, and see how you can kind of marry the two, if you will. Again, your books are going to be able to be projected, so that's not going to be an issue. Now, what I have seen for teachers as far as guided reading goes, I've seen kids being pushed into breakout rooms and a teacher goes in and visits each breakout room. Okay, some districts are like, no, we can't do that. So this is what, again, this is going to be training. If we're all here together and pretend there are only 4 of us, I will say to Haley, you're going to read to me here in just a minute. Audra and Tenley, I need for you to turn your volume down so you don't hear us. Okay. Now, I also need for you to pay attention to me. You know, you're reading the book, but I also need for you to be able to see me, because when I'm done with Haley, I'm going to hold up a note card that's going to say somebody's name. So, Audra, you might be next. Or maybe they turn their volume almost all the way down. You might, that's how I've seen the virtual aspect work. So if you can't push them into individual breakout rooms where they're projecting the book themselves and you can go in and visit, the only other way that I would think that would work is to have them all together in the main room and just have them adjust their volume so that you can read. That would be the ideal situation. You could have them, maybe they don't know how to turn down their volume, so they turn to the side so they're not distracted. As I'm reading with Haley, Tenley and Audra, you're just going to kind of read your book over here to the side and keep looking back and forth. Do they have the paper copy for Reading A to Z, or is it going to be projected for them?
We have digital access.
Okay, so yeah, they're going to have to look at the screen then. It's going to be it's going to be training.
So they all have their own devices. It is going to be in their own like breakout room. We can
they can go into their own breakout room?
So with the group, like a teacher and the group of 5 or 6 students would be in a breakout room, or that would be a designated time just for those students.
Okay, so those individual students cannot break off into additional.
Well, what I was
They
thinking,
might be
Audrey,
able
even
to.
like even for first grade, if I'm in small groups, for example, I can actually project the story and they can see it. And so if I have, like you said, Blanca, put them each in a breakout room, I can project it because some of my first graders might have a hard time logging in, trying to find access to the story. So I can project it and they can all read it on their own. And then I can go into each room with them and then do all of the questions and that. So I did look, and we do have access a little bit to the A to Z right now. So I was trying to find something. So, and it looks very
Perfect.
similar. So
That's Vanessa, exactly what I was
Thank you
talking
for
about.
sharing, Vanessa.
Oh my gosh, because some districts are saying, no, I can't put them into individual breakout rooms, but if you can, yes, that's perfect, right? How much better? Now you really don't have anybody,
right.
You can't listen to anybody. So you just say, I'm trusting that you're going to be reading because I'm going to be popping into your breakout room, right? So I'm going to hold you accountable. So good. I'm glad. That's the best way to do it. Absolutely. And just have, again, when you're planning, just have your questions ready. And then you're going to be ready. You are going to be A-okay, ready to go. Ready to go. What other questions do we have either around virtual or in person or about any piece of this lesson plan?
Yeah, that was just my question. That's why I had said what was difficult was how was I going to get them all to, read at the same time and be able to listen to everyone. And so I was just kind of brainstorming with Gina about what we could do. And that's kind of what we came up with is if we do the breakout rooms, still keep them in our small group. So not necessarily during our main whole group time, but I think that would work.
I absolutely know it would work. I do. And this is the cool part about that too, is that you're going to be able to they'll be able to, well, you can, because if they can't really use their Annotate, if they're not there yet, because I taught first grade for a long time.
Actually, we do that. So we did it today. Yeah, we're talking about parts of the pumpkin, and I actually had kids that were able to draw from. So we're getting there. Yes.
See the power of yet. I always say, okay,
yes.
They might not be there yet, but have them circle something that's exciting while they're reading. So instead of that sticky note strategy that I was saying, give them something to do, right? So you have the question, okay, I want you to tell me the beginning, middle, and end, or whatever it is, but I also want you to be underlining or highlighting or circling something, right? So now they're getting very, very savvy with Zoom tools. I tell you, kids are amazing, and that you're able to do that. It's just fantastic.
Like having their own smartboard.
Yes, I absolutely
cool.
love it. You're already brainstorming. You're already thinking. The power of projecting the book is going to be huge, and making sure they understand what to do so they're not highlighting and doing all that kind of stuff all over everything. But again, it's training. If they were in person with you, that's what would be taking place anyway. Great.
Yeah, upper grades are much easier to train and, do the breakout rooms and all that. But man, the first grade teachers, I have a close friend in first grade, and she is doing a great job. She's amazing what these first graders adapt to. It's amazing. I'm so impressed.
They are phenomenal. So what I wanted us to do, and we don't have time to do it today, is my next step for you, and you actually have this in your participant guide, would be for you to build it. This is actually, I walked you through a level J, short read. This is a guided reading level D. You have the teacher copy in your participant guide, and let me just take a peek. I believe it's page 20, I think. And then you have the teacher copy, and you have the student copy as well in there. So what the student would see. And you also have the lesson plan. So the next logical step would be for you to take a look at the lesson plan and plan out each of those sections. So the you do portion, that would be the next piece. Now, if you don't normally use the short reads, you use something else, you're going to use reading A to Z, you're going to use a text, that is absolutely fine. Be thinking about how the different pieces of the lesson plan are going to fall into place according to whatever text you're going to be using, but this would be that logical next step. So I'm going to pause again for questions and see how we're doing, because at this time I would have given you time to actually do this. And while you're thinking about questions or comments or anything, I want to review what we went over today. Today we talked about guided reading. We talked about how the planning happens in every single section of our lesson plan. And planning is so important. We talked about what the before section of a guided reading lesson plan looks like. We're going to introduce the story. We're going to give a gist. You're going to talk about the instructional focus. What's the purpose? What do you want them to do? Front load any vocabulary. And we're going to state why we're having them do what we want to do. If students don't know why they're doing something, it's just like us as adults. We need to know the why behind it. In our during section, 8 to 10 minutes long, students are whisper or silent reading, depending on the grade level that you're working with. You have a job. You're going to be conferring and prompting, supporting, and listening to your students. And you're going to ask comprehension questions. Nothing major, but you're going to check for understanding as you're talking with them. And then we have our after reading portion, 3 to 5 minutes. You're going to have a meaningful discussion about the story. You're going to reinforce that instructional focus and either reteach or celebrate what they did well. Continue to ask those questions to offer deeper comprehension opportunities. Again, those are your within, about, and beyond questions. For those of you that have those cards, they're located on the back side of those, or you're creating your own. Why is guided reading important? Well, it provides that just right amount of support that's going to help our students grow. It gives us an opportunity to work with those small groups. It offers that gradual release process that's going to start with you as a teacher doing a lot of that heavy lifting. And now it ends with less on you, more responsibility on your students. Your students are going to really feel special as they get to read one-on-one with you. And it's going to allow you to basically individualize your time with your students, allows you opportunity to confer. So what do our next steps look like? Well, I think we kind of talked about that. Find a text that's appropriate for your level. For my virtual teachers, you're going to go ahead and decide how you're going to project that and how you're going to really train the students, right? I think that's going to be your next step for my virtual teachers. All right. Right on time, I think. And that was a lot for the cooking show of getting started with guided reading. I want to, Tinley, would you put our email addresses into the chat box? I want you to know this is not a one and done opportunity. This is, we're here for you. Scholastic is here for you. I'm here for you. And I want you to know if you have questions as you get going. You might not know what you don't know yet. Please reach out. I encourage you to. I'm here to support you, as is Tinley. We love working with your school district. And if there are questions that you think of down the road, I offer my support to you. I know Tinley's going to drop in a survey in just a few moments.
I put it in.
Thank you. And if you would be so kind. So sorry, Tinley.
Oh, I just want to make sure that people can open it, because the last session, I guess you're having a hard time opening that instead of a link. So just make sure that's the correct
one. You can open that. My name is Blanca Cunha, and we'll see if can you drop that in the chat too, or you probably already did. Put my name in there. And this is getting started with guided reading.
I just wanted to quickly thank each of you for being here today, for your time in learning more about guided reading. But I especially want to thank Tinley and Blanca for your support today and for what you've taught us about this. Again, we don't know what we'd do without you. If it's getting started seems overwhelming, but you've broken it down to make it seem very doable. And we appreciate the extended support even beyond this training. So thank you for that. Additionally, to our teachers, a reminder, we have a drop-in session next Thursday. So if you just have any questions, or you just you want to walk through a lesson, I'd be happy to help you as well and coach you. So just drop in. I'm over in the PD room, T2, from 3 to 4:30 next Thursday.
That's fantastic. Thank you, teachers.
Thank you.
So wonderful. I appreciate your participation and your wonderful questions. I wish you a wonderful start to guided reading, and I look forward to seeing and maybe chatting with you some other time.
Thank you again.
Thanks, Audra. I appreciate it.